Something very unusual just unfolded inside one of America's most controversial daytime talk shows, and if early reports are accurate, it could be one of the clearest signs yet that the audience relationship with mainstream media is breaking down in real time. Because during a recent live taping of The View, something happened that producers almost never prepare for. The studio audience didn't just disagree with what was being said, they didn't just react. They didn't even sit quietly and move on. They started getting up and leaving, one by one, then in groups. And what followed next made the situation even more uncomfortable. Because as tensions rose inside the studio, parts of the remaining audience reportedly began booing the very hosts they were there to watch. Inside a live ABC broadcast, inside one of the most established daytime shows in America. And according to behind-the-scenes chatter, what followed was immediate panic among production staff trying to regain control of the taping. When a live audience turns against a show in real time, it stops being just entertainment. It becomes a signal, a warning, and possibly a reflection of something much bigger happening in the media landscape right now. Before we break everything down, make sure you're subscribed, because what's happening behind the scenes in mainstream television right now is escalating fast, and most people aren't paying attention to it yet. Now, let's get into what actually happened. It's May 16th, 2026, and once again, The View has found itself at the center of controversy. A show that has been on television for decades, known for its panel discussions, celebrity interviews, and political commentary, has also become one of the most polarizing programs in modern daytime TV. For years, it has featured hosts like Joy Behar, Whoopi Goldberg, and Sunny Hostin, personalities who are no strangers to strong political opinions and heated debates. But in recent years, critics argue something has shifted. What was once marketed as a conversational talk show has increasingly become a politically charged commentary platform. And that shift, according to critics, is now starting to show consequences in real time. Behind the scenes, ABC and Disney have already been dealing with growing scrutiny over ratings, performance, and audience retention across multiple programs. Late-night shows, daytime shows, and political commentary segments have all been under pressure as viewing habits continue to change. And while networks often adapt slowly to audience behavior, critics argue that adaptation hasn't been fast enough. That's where The View enters the conversation. Because unlike scripted entertainment, talk shows rely heavily on audience trust, not just viewers at home, but also the live studio audience that reacts in real time. And when that trust starts to crack, the reaction is immediate. According to accounts of the episode in question, things escalated during a politically charged discussion segment involving Sunny Hostin. During the conversation, Hostin made comments addressing broader social and political trends, touching on cultural identity, relationships, and political alignment. Her remarks framed certain demographic and ideological groups in a way that immediately shifted the tone of the discussion. The energy inside the studio reportedly changed almost instantly. What had started as a standard panel exchange turned into a tense political commentary moment. Joy Behar later reinforced similar viewpoints during the discussion, adding further commentary that doubled down on the same general direction of the conversation. At that point, the atmosphere inside the studio was no longer neutral. It was divided. What happened next is what turned a normal taping into a viral talking point. Multiple audience members reportedly began standing up and leaving their seats during the live broadcast. Not just a few isolated exits, but a visible wave of disengagement. In a controlled television environment, especially during a live taping, audience presence is part of the structure of the show. So when people start leaving, it immediately becomes noticeable. Production staff reportedly became aware almost instantly that something was wrong. And that was only the beginning. As the segment continued, reports suggest that remaining audience members began expressing their dissatisfaction audibly. Booing inside a daytime talk show is rare, but according to descriptions of the moment, it was loud enough to disrupt the flow of the segment. The hosts continued speaking, but the energy in the room had already shifted significantly. What viewers at home saw was a polished broadcast, but inside the studio, according to reports, the situation felt far less controlled. At that point, producers allegedly had to intervene behind the scenes to keep the show moving forward. Segments were adjusted, timing was reshuffled, and the natural rhythm of the taping was disrupted. When a live show loses audience control, production teams have very little time to react. According to behind-the-scenes accounts, staff quickly worked to stabilize the situation and prevent further escalation. Some segments were reportedly shortened or transitioned more quickly than planned. Additional on-air personnel were brought in to maintain continuity of the broadcast. And internally, the focus shifted from content delivery to damage control. Because once audience reaction becomes the story, the original segment stops mattering. This incident has now sparked wider discussion online about audience behavior and media polarization. Some observers see this as a sign of growing frustration with politically heavy daytime television. Others argue that live audience reactions are unpredictable and don't necessarily reflect broader public opinion. But regardless of interpretation, one thing is clear. This moment has become symbolic of a larger shift in how audiences interact with mainstream media, where viewers are no longer passive, they are reactive, and increasingly vocal. This moment now feeds into a much larger and ongoing question about the direction of mainstream television. Especially for major networks like ABC and corporate owners like Disney, the challenge is becoming increasingly complex. How do you maintain engaging political discussion without alienating a portion of your audience? Where is the line between meaningful commentary and content that becomes too divisive for a general daytime audience? And perhaps even more importantly, what happens when the audience no longer responds the way producers expect them to? Because traditional television was built on a certain level of predictability. Applause at the right time, laughter at the right moment, silence when required. But when that rhythm breaks even briefly, it exposes how fragile that structure actually is. And once that structure becomes unstable, every future episode carries a little more uncertainty, not just for the hosts, but for the entire production system behind it. Because audience trust is not something that can be easily measured in real time. It builds slowly, and when it shifts, it often does so quietly until moments like this make it visible. Whether this incident ultimately leads to internal adjustments, changes in production approach, or is eventually dismissed as an isolated moment of audience reaction, it still highlights something important about modern media environments. Live television is no longer operating in a passive viewing culture. Audiences today are more aware, more vocal, and far quicker to react than ever before. And in that environment, even a single moment inside a studio can extend far beyond its original broadcast window, turning into clips, debates, commentary threads, and larger cultural discussions almost instantly. Because in today's media landscape, attention moves faster than control, and once a moment escapes the studio, it rarely stays contained. And this one clearly already hasn't. Drop your thoughts in the comments because this is exactly the kind of moment where everyone seems to have a different opinion. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.